Okay, Shabbat Shalom, everyone. We are now, and welcome to our Genesis 23 study. We are really excited because we have been dissecting the life of Abraham. And, you know, as we discussed even in the prayer just now, and asking Yahuah just to show us ourselves in these stories and how we've been able to see that, how we've been able to see how faced with these same situations, placed in the same exact circumstance, how we probably would have responded the exact same way, you know, and how those times in our lives, we are to reflect what he's saying to us in scripture so that we now know how to live, so that we now know how to answer all of these questions, so that we now know how to answer and respond to and perform in the testing that will befall us. It's guaranteed. And chapter 22 was a very interesting passage because we looked at Abraham and his son and Yahuah testing his faith, seeing if he is what he's made out to be, seeing if he is the father of our faith, seeing if he is who he says that he is. And as we see, Yahuah, felt that Abraham passed with flying colors, you know, when he tells him not to lay a hand to the angel of Yah on the boy. When he says, now I see, now I know that he is who he says he is. And how those are the same things we want Yahuah to say about us in our testing, how apropos that Rick's message just blended right through it. Continuation, you know, the word never fails us. Excuse me. So, and then at the end of the chapter, verses 20 to 24 in chapter 22, it's like Yahuah takes a minute to show us what we're going to see, and he pulls out this name Nahor, and in the midst we see the name Rebecca, and we know who Rebecca is going to be. But then he just stops there, and then we go on to chapter 23, which we're going to discuss Sarah and all the things we're going to see that go on in this chapter, how it's perfectly written. You know, and you know, as a writer myself, you know, when I look at this, I just say, you know, how beautiful a writer is Yah, you know, where he can walk us through these stories and stop and have us reflect on something specific and then pick back up on where he left off, because there's something he wants to see specifically in the passage. And it looks like a pause. If you really read it, it looks like a pause in time to show something specific. And we're going to see what that is. So I just wanted to kind of pull that out and kind of give us a mindset that we're coming off of victory where Abraham is tested and passes. And then we see mentioned his son, Isaac's wife to be, and then we go back to his mother. So we're going to look at this passage and just try to pull out all the things that are here. We're going to take 5 verses at a time. So who wants to read the first 5 verses of chapter 23? Raise your hand. Rick, raise his hand first.
I'll do it if nobody else wants to. Well, I see Jonathan, or Nathaniel rather. If he wants to read, go ahead. Or I'll start it. All right, Genesis 23:1. And Sarah was 127 years old. These were the years in the life of Sarah. And Sarah died in Kiryat Arba, the same as Chevron in the land of Canaan. And Abraham came to mourn for Sarah and to weep for her. And Abraham stood up from before his dead and spoke unto the sons of Seth, saying, I am a stranger and a sojourner with you. Give me a possession of the burying place with you, that I may bury my dead out of my sight. And the children of Seth answered Aleph Tav, Abraham, saying unto him. Interesting that I see at this burying place that he's asking for a burying place to be able to bury her. Guess we're going to see the answer to this as we go on here, but 127 years she lived a long life here in these journeys and seen a lot with Abraham in these places. For her to come to this end where she's laying here, quite an end to the story of her life that we get to see how it ended for her. So I'm looking forward to the end of this. There's not a lot more for me to pull out of here. I left Tav in there as one time. That's with Abraham. So I guess that was the final covenant between him and his wife, yeah? So that's all I got to see. I'll let others say what they got to see.
No, that's good, brother. Anyone else want to add anything to the first 5 verses? There's quite a bit there. Go ahead, Brother Nate.
Just briefly, in verse 2, she died in Kiriath Arba. Whenever I see that name Arba, it just kind of reminds me of Joshua, chapter 14 and 15. Joshua was the father of Anak, who we call the Anakim. That's why. And so the name of the city. That's why the name of the city is City of Arba, which also can be translated as the city of the giants, or city of the 4 giants. The Arba being the father of Anak. So I don't know how exactly that portrays. I'd have to maybe look deeper to maybe if there's a deeper symbology meaning of her dying in the city of the giants, or the city of the giant. But I don't know. I just wanted to point that out.
Yeah, no, that's very good. I was actually going to point the same thing out. Nate mentioned Joshua chapter 14, and we see that Kirjath Arba, means the village of Arba, or the village of the 4, and he mentioned the giants. So let's look at Joshua 14 right quick. Joshua 14:15. It says, and the name of Hebron formerly was Kirjath Arba. Arba was the greatest man among the Anakim. Then the land had rest from war. So the greatest man, the greatest of the giants of the Anakim, was Kirjath Arba. So very interesting that this would be the place where Abraham would go to bury Sarah. But look in verse 3. It says, then Abraham stood up from before his dead and spoke to the sons of Heth, saying, I am a foreigner and a visitor among you. Give me property for a burial place among you, that I may bury my dead out of my sight. So if you remember, Yah's promise to him was the land of Canaan, right? But this is not yet his land. This is still owned by the Canaanites. And, as we look in chapter 13, we see the Hebron trees. We see Canaan. We see we see him negotiate. Remember chapter 21, he negotiates for the well. Abimelech coming and telling him he knew nothing of it. He didn't know that they were trying to, swindle him for this well. But we see, and we're starting to recognize when Abraham negotiated with Yahusha for Lot, for what was going on in Sodom and Gomorrah, was a traditional thing, was of the custom. They often, or very customarily, would negotiate for things. As a matter of fact, those of you who've known people or have gone to Israel know that when you go to the marketplace, it is expected to negotiate for a fair price for whatever they're selling. Matter of fact, they even feel, from what I understand, offended if you don't if they give you a price and you just paying for it. They feel offended that you didn't give them the pleasure of the negotiation. It's an actual thing. It's a customary thing to do. So this land then gets negotiated for, but Abraham is doing something specific here, and we'll see in the next 5 verses of why he's negotiating for this land and the reason that he wants to pay for this land and what he's going to do with this land. So, I just often remember reading through this chapter and just looking at it as, okay, he's burying his wife, boom, 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 we're going to move on. But there's something specific here, and there's a reason why we're reading it this way. Anatolia was the center of where the Hittites had their principal city. It's modern Turkey now, as we know it. So very interesting area. Very interesting how Abraham is being promised this land, and how now we're going to see him starting to obtain it piece by piece by piece, and how Yahuah is always true to his promises there. So I wanted to pull that out. But that's good, Brother Nate. Very good connection. We have to do cross references here because they tell us the story of what's going on, and very good cross reference with Joshua chapter 14. Anybody else before we move on? Okay, I'll point something else out. Verse 4, he says, "I am a foreigner and a visitor." And the reason I think this is interesting is he's telling them who he is, and he's establishing his point or starting point for the negotiation, because there's about to be some negotiating that happens. So he's saying, I'm a foreigner and a visitor, basically a resident alien. Like, I'm in this land, I don't own this land, I'm not of this land, but there's something here that I want to offer. So this is my starting point. I'm letting you know who I am, and I think that's going to be important as we read forward. So there's a bargaining position that he's starting from. If you have no foundation, you have no basis upon which you can negotiate. Like if I have no money, then I have to have something else to offer as a starting point for the negotiation, or else it's on to the next person. You understand? Establishing his point, who he is, and why he's there. So, Brother Nate, you want to read the next 5 verses?
Yes, I'll continue.
All right, thank you.
"Hear us, my master. You are a prince of Elohim among us. Bury your dead in the choicest of our burial sites. None of us withholds from you his burial site from burying your dead." So Abraham rose and bowed himself to the people of the land, the sons of Heth. And he spoke with them, saying, "If it is your desire that I bury my dead from my presence, hear me and approach Ephron, son of Sohar, for me. And let me have the cave of Machpelah, which he has, which is at the end of his field, let him give it to me for the complete amount of silver as property for a burial site among you. And Ephron dwelt among the sons of Heth, and Ephron the Hittite answered Abraham in the hearing of the sons of Heth, all who entered at the gate of his city, saying,
Go ahead, read verse 11.
okay. No, my master, listen to me. I shall give you the field and the cave that is in it. I shall give it to you in the presence of the sons of my people. I shall give it to you. Bury your dead. I guess there's a point that I'll probably make, but I'm gonna wait a little later for that one. So I think maybe the next one here. But interesting, with the translational things is kind of what I picked up on. So verse 6. So in the King James, it says, "Hear us, my Lord, thou art a mighty prince among us." Yet in the interlinear, it says, "Shamanu, hear us, Adonai, my Lord or Lord." Nasi, a prince, Elohim, Ata, so a prince, mighty you are. You could also kind of translate that, so I can kind of understand why the King James would have put mighty prince, but in the ISR they translated it as a prince of Elohim among us. I wonder. If it would be, again, I'm not quite, fluent in Hebrew. So I don't know why one translation would say, a mighty prince. Another one would say a prince of Elohim. But I kind of see here that it would be, a prince of Elohim. But maybe not. But regardless, you see the respect that these men had, because they don't see eye to eye, as we know. They worship differently in different ways. Probably have different names and different styles. Yet the respect that they have for Abraham, and also you kind of could understand Abraham comes with a reputation too, as we've read along here. People that have tried to cross him or tried to do things. Yahuah has done some extraordinary accounts. Caused plagues and different things, and so people kind of already have an understanding of. Hey, let this guy do what he wants to do, and let him go upon his way, because we don't want to interfere, so that we pick apart his path, so that we upset the one who protects him. So I think that's it's good for us. It's a good example for us to be have a good reputation for us, to be respectable, even if we don't see eye to eye with those in the world. We're supposed to be ambassadors, which Abraham's a real good model for us to model after, because you see the respect that they have.
Absolutely, brother. That mighty, they're using mighty definitely as an adjective for deity there, because they're understanding, from a Canaanite perspective, what Abraham's reputation, as you put it, would have preceded him. They would have known that he was a prince of the mighty one, of the Elohim. Same word used in Genesis 1:1, Elohim. So good point there. So what they're doing here, it's important what they're doing here, because of who he is, because they know of who he is and whose he is, right? They're giving him a burial place for Sarah. Keep that in mind. The Hittites, the Canaanites, know who he is, know who his Elohim is, and as an act of kindness, they offer or give him the land. to bury his wife. But as we're going to see, something else happens here. And it's important that we see it, because it's kind of similar to what happened after he defeated those kings, and then they offered him something prior to him meeting Melchizedek. Remember Abraham's response? He didn't want anything from them. Why? So that no one that was not of Yah could say they gave him something or did something for him, nor did he want spoils of ill-gotten gain. Right? Remember that? We went over that? So something similar is going on here. Abraham stood up and bowed, right? A custom that also would have taken place. We saw that early in Genesis 2. When you approach someone's land or someone's approaching you, you stood up and bowed. You know, we're going to see that again in the next verse. But he was not willing, as we're going to see, to use this borrowed or given land. It was something specific he wanted to do, and there was a reason why he wanted to do it. Anyone else on those verses?
Yeah, I'll go back to what he was asking about in Genesis 26 or 23:6. The way that I like to read this, it would be in a lexicon, because it goes word by word, and it should say to hear Adon Elohim, and then Nessie, which is basically the one lifted up, or chief prince. So basically, is in the midst of us, in the midst. So he's talking about to basically hear Shema Adonai Elohim. So he's talking about it as well as he's the Adonai, or the Lord, the Elohim, the chief prince, the one lifted up, is in the midst to bury and die. It looks to me like that's a reference to Yahusha being the one that was being lifted up there at that moment. You know, in the example of how it's laying out each of those words to make a statement. You know, you change the flow of the words, and answer your question about that is, you know, these translators trying to make it easy for people to understand, and by them taking the liberties to rearrange words to make it flow better to their ears, or what they think their people might like, instead of what is it really saying here, because you're not supposed to change a dot or a tittle. So there's importance to where everything lays, because it's you change one word, you change the whole meaning of what's being said usually. So I like to try to go word for word as best we can, even if it doesn't sound to make sense to us in our way of how we speak. But if we allow it to speak the way it speaks, it says something different. To me, that's telling me that that's the Adon, that's the master. That's the prince, the high prince, the lifted up one, Elohim, all the one that fits all of those categories is Yahusha there. And that's all the way back in Genesis, right? We see him sprinkled throughout all of this. I can't even say sprinkled, because it's like interwoven. He's in here that I'm seeing him. But, when you look at those words like that, it's important. I agree. There was some things you said there about him bound down. That's, but they gave him this land. He's putting forth a petition that he wants to be where his wife is laid in this land, which basically was his anyway. So what ends up happening? They end up giving it to him, like you said, that's the beginning of him taking possession of what is the promised land for him and Sarah. If that's where she lays, that's her promised land, right? She is there in that land. So that's pretty interesting, without getting into the depths of the 4 giants or whatever that represents, the meaning of that place. But whatever it was, that's where Yahuwah decided to lay her in that place. So interesting stuff, brother.
Absolutely. You said something there that I want to touch on, but I don't want to. Does anyone else want to add anything? Anything you see? Mecca, he's back. Go ahead, brother.
All right. So, I see a very interesting connection here with Mashiach, because you have Abraham being, asking for a place to bury his, his wife, and to bury his dead as well. And, initially, they're telling him, you can have any place here, and, you can see that they're not even trying to charge him, for it. The mentality is just saying, you like any place that you want here, you can have, that you may bury your dead. No one will withhold their sepulture from you. And, when you look at it, in verse 9, in verse 9, he says, he's asking for a specific tomb, the cave of Machpelah, which he has, in which, he says, which is in the end of his field. For as much money as it is worth, he shall give it for me, give it to me for a possession of the burying place among you. And so now you have him here offering, pretty much full price of what, he is asking. And so, I was just thinking of, Mashiach taking the keys of death, and Sheol, that he paid the ultimate price, and it's not as if the Father already didn't give him power over, death, but he went even further, and instead of saying, with what he gotten freely, which was pretty much, having faith in the Father and walking out the power and authority that was given to him, it wasn't enough for him just to say, okay, you've given me this power over this, and I'm just going to, take it. But he paid the ultimate price. He paid the full price, which was his life and his blood, to gain full control and to take the keys from Hasatan, over death, and having that dominion and power over us, to be able to put who's deserving of death in their graves, but also take from the graves, those that are deserving of life, to take them out of the grave, and so I thought that was something that stood out, and it was a interesting connection.
What you said reminded me of what I wanted to say, and I forgot about it. But the connection between the Mashiach's grave as well. How that story. I'm going to go get the scripture, but he just reminded me of that. But wasn't that he was asking for the tomb, and it was some like rich man's tomb or something, and I'm trying to remember exactly how it goes, but you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, it's Joseph of Arimathea. But there's a point to what you just said and what Emeka said that is beautiful, that I don't even know. Both of y'all are hinting towards something. Yahusha borrowed a tomb that was owned by someone because he was giving it back. Abraham is asking for a tomb, but doesn't want to borrow it. He wants to purchase it to own it so that his wife could be placed there and him later forever. So that it was a spot that they would know where their family would be. And there's a reason for that. I'm going to go ahead and read the next 5 because we're going to see why. But very good points. Very great connection. And the same but the opposite. Because they want to give him a land, right? It says, verse 12, then Abraham bowed himself down before the people of the land. And he spake to Ephron in the hearing of the people of the land, saying, if you will give it, please hear me. I will give you money for the field. Take it from me, and I will bury my dead there. And Ephron answered Abraham, saying to him, my Lord, listen to me. The land is worth 400 shekels of silver. What is that between you and me? So bury your dead. Right? So here we have what we were talking about earlier, the negotiation. If he gives it to him, he can take it back. Abraham wanted to possess it. He wanted to own it. So he's negotiating the price. I don't want you to give it to me. I don't want to borrow it. This is something sacred for my wife. I want to own it, and I want it to be a place for my family. We don't want it to be taken back in an argument or war. This is my land after I pay the purchase price. So the point Mecca made that Yahusha just couldn't come and give us salvation. There was a price he had to pay for it. In the same way, Abraham didn't want this just to be given to him. He wanted to purchase it. He wanted to pay the price for it so that it would be his. So there would be no question. There would be no question who Messiah is because he paid the price for it. There would be no question that this was Abraham's land because he purchased it. He paid the price for it. And that is what he is negotiating with Ephron. And Ephron doesn't see it the way Abraham sees it. He's saying, he's trying to act like, look, I don't need that money. It's 400 shekels of silver. What is it? What is that to me? What is that to you? Just bury your dead. No, I'm going to collect the money and get it to you, So I wanted to pull that out because it kind of tied exactly what you guys were saying together. What else is there in those verses we just read? Verses 12 through 15.
That reminded me of what you just said about the purchasing. Remind me of when Yahusha was being tempted in the wilderness, where Hasatan said, "I will give you." He showed him the kingdoms of the world and said, "I will give you all this, but the price will be if you bow down and worship me." And then Yahusha was like, "Yeah." He told him that it is written that Yahuwah is the only one. We worship Yah only, and Him only will we serve. And it was like, I was just thinking about like that negotiation, like you said. It's like if he would have gave him that, it's like he would have had something over Abraham. And like, what price would Abraham would have had to pay later on in order to keep that land? And it's like I just made that connection in my head, like, yeah, Hasatan offering Yahusha the whole world basically, but the price is bow down and worship me. And it's like Abraham not basically, it's like almost in that way he's like, I see him not bowing down, be like, but no, I'm going to pay the price. And like in my head, I'm sort of making that connection as well. But that's all I wanted to add.
Yeah, that's good, man.
I really like what Brian just said, because I think it really concludes that full entire connection. That Yahusha said, I don't want to just give in. I'm about to pay the ultimate price, and I'm gonna take it all from you. I think that is powerful.
Yeah, for sure, brothers. That definitely is it. But I like verse 15 too, because he says, "My Lord, listen to me. The land is worth 400 shekels of silver. What is that between you and me? So bury your dead." So this is a step-by-step. This is also giving us a step-by-step process of the bargaining process, right? We're watching what we've seen customarily up to this point. We saw introduced when Abraham was with the Malachim and Yahusha for the life of Lot and any souls who would turn towards him. I think he got it down to 5 or 10 to 5 souls. And we see it continue here as is customary to bargain for the purchase price. And then Ephron mentions the price, but then dismisses it like, we don't need to do this. You don't need to pay for it. But Abraham insists to purchase. Very good point. Very good connection to Messiah. What else is there? JP, Nate? What you?
I'm gonna wait till the completion of the reading to share.
Okay, brother. JP? All right, let's Oh, you good? Okay. All right. You want to read the last 4 verses 16 to 20?
Yes, sir. It says, and Abraham hearkened unto Ephron, and Abraham weighed to Ephron the silver which he had named in the audience of the sons of Heth, 400 shekels of silver, current money with the merchant. And the field of Ephron, which was in Machpelah, which was before Mamre, the field and the cave which was therein, and all the trees that were in the field, that were in all the borders round about, were made sure unto Abraham for a possession in the presence of the children of Heth, before all that went in at the gate of his city. And after this, Abraham buried Sarah's wife in the cave of the field of Machpelah, before Mamre. The same is Hebron in the land of Canaan. And the field and the cave that is therein were made sure unto Abraham for a possession of a burying place by the sons of Heth.
What you see there, brother?
The only thing that came to mind was just the when we even today, I guess, just to make it sense of it today, when we make a deal, or we do something, like, it's always good to have witnesses, and you seen right there in that verse, he says he did it in the presence of the children of Heth, because the children were going to be lasting longer than, assuming, than the father. So that just made sense to do that, so that they know, this is for. So then, of course, they're going to tell their children, and it's going to be a for sure thing. So that's about it, brother.
Yeah, no, that absolutely ties in with what we've been discussing up into now. The witnesses. It's said before everyone who lived in that town, all of the men that were there, and the surrounding borders. not just the cave, but also the trees and the field purchased with all these witnesses. This is now his land. He's given the deed to this land. It can't be taken back. Now, if he just gave it to him, I just gave it to you for a little while. We need to take that. We're gonna need that land. We need to put some tents on there. You know, so dig up the bones and get on out, skedaddle. You know, nah, we're not gonna go down that road. We're not going to have you own something that was meant for me. This is the same. Remember, this is the same land that Yahuwah gave to him. What would it look like if Yahuwah gave it to him and then took it away? You know, how would he be a Yah that answers promises or that keeps his promises? You know, so this plays in to the promise of Yah. Go ahead, Nate.
Yeah, that's that touches with what I've been kind of waiting to say, is that we always got to remember, you know, how to apply it into our day, into our lives today, our day. And you know, what can I learn from this? You know, how does this help me in my walk? What's the examples that we have here? What are the positive and negative learning lessons? And I see one of them in continually throughout, as you know, when you read like the book of Exodus, or or in Joshua, they're erecting like monuments, or as like testimonies. You know, they crossed the River Jordan coming in out of the Promised Land, and they put stones, 12 stones, or they erected monuments, one on one side or on the other, to stand as a witness. Yeah, we came through here. As you know, if anyone's studied kind of the crossing at the Red Sea. There was two pillars they put on, one on either side, with the one had been washed clean because it was in the water had kind of washed it clean, but on the other side, as like stood a witness. Yeah, we crossed through here, we came through here, we took this land, or and so you see Abraham not just you can almost because these people here that they're dealing with, maybe Heth, maybe he was trustworthy, but were his sons going to be trustworthy? Maybe the Pharaoh remembered Joseph, but what about the Pharaoh after him? Does he remember who Joseph is? So sometimes you got to have that piece of paper, the word wasn't just given to us, it was also written down to stand as a testimony. Talking about like giving your wife a certificate of divorce. Yahusha talks about that. I'm not advocating divorce, by the way, but there needs to be things that we do, not just necessarily on a word or on a handshake, and this actually stood witness for me when I just recently, sold my RV. I had to have my brother-in-law, who I trust completely. I gave him the title of my RV, and the title was signed on the back. So like if he was mischievous, all he had to do was just go down and register in his name. He got a free RV, but Yahuwah like gave me these references, brought these up in my studies in my mind. It was like Nathaniel, like, you trust him? Yes, I trust him. He's like, I trust him too. He's not going to do anything, but it's not a good habit to do this, to just blindly trust on this aspect. So he had me, Yahuwah guided me on writing a contract between my brother-in-law and I, to where I, consigned him, liaison, and got into, kind of like some legality on that. But to stood as like a witness of just in case, or this or that, so he couldn't pull a rug out from underneath me. So it's a good lesson to have. That's what I take from this, is that Abram wanted to have this so that, just as you said, no one could be like, yeah, we need some tents here, and get your bones up and get out, because that was my father's deal with you, and I'm not my father, so later. But now, no, here's the deed. I bought it with the silver. This is my land. This was an agreed a price. It wasn't just given to me. This is something that we have a witness, and your children are a witness to it. So there's no going back at that point.
Absolutely, man. Great analogy. I would really appreciate the story you were able to tell about you and the selling of your RV, because this is a formal legal matter. This is the way a formal legal matter would have been handled of that time. You know, this is the witness. You know, the paying for the paying process, the negotiation, and then the deed giving. You know, this was a spot again where he was going to bury his wife, and as we found in chapter 25, this is also where he's going to be buried. So there is no, you know, taking back. There is no going back. And what a beautiful story this is. You know, fascinating to read how Yahuwah teaches us these things, literally taking a pause between mentioning Rebecca and when Isaac meets her, and telling us the story of the negotiation of the land where Sarah would be buried, and how we have so many lessons that we learn from this, and even how, you know, it would have been Abraham's responsibility to take care of that land from that point on. It had beautiful tamarind trees there. You know, those had to be maintained. The area had to be maintained. And how this again comes full circle in the beginning of Yahuwah answering his promise to Abraham and Sarah, and how Sarah, you know, passes after she sees her son become an adult. You know, so beautiful, beautiful passage. What else you guys see before we end this particular study? Great summation, Nate, the way you waited to the end to bring all those things together, and you know, good insight, because, you know, exactly what I was seeing, you know, it's almost like we sat down and read together. You know what I mean? All the things that we're able to pull out. But, you know, how beautiful it is when we sit and we slowly walk through these verses, you know, versus reading through to the next point, you know, because very often chapter 23 is just, oh, and by the way, versus going in and finding out what is Yahuwah saying to us here. Go ahead, Michael.
You know, it's exactly how the Father does it as well, because he's like Elohim of covenant. He's not one that just says something and there's no signing on the dotted line to guarantee it. So even when you look, you know, at the connection that was made earlier with Messiah, you know, in Isaiah chapter 42, I believe it's Isaiah 42. He says, yeah, it is Isaiah 42. He says in, trying to find the verse here, but he says, I will give you, he's talking about his, this servant or Yahusha. He says, I will give you for a covenant. Oh yeah, it's verse 6. He says, I, Yahuwah, have called you in righteousness and will hold your hand and will keep you and will give you for a covenant of the people, for a light of the other nations. And so, I mean, even concluding, you know, once he shed that blood, it was like the covenant was then solidified and he was given possession. You know, he was given, you know, we also were given that guarantee of salvation for those of us who have faith in him and trust in him, you know, and obey his commandments. And so, you know, I definitely, you know, right, spot on with what Nate was saying. You know, that is the way things should be done. They should be done in covenant or in contract.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I was blown away reading through this chapter this week, and just, you know, just being able to see so many new things, you know, that are lying there, and then to hear you guys express what you see. It's I'm really appreciating the way we study together, you know. Go ahead, JP.
Yeah, just looking at that word Hebron or Hebron, I just thought it was interesting. I was looking on the Blue Letter Bible at the, I think it's called the Gesenius Hebrew Chaldee Lexicon. And it gives you a description, and it says, well, of course, it writes it in the Hebrew and in the Chaldee writings. I don't know what that really says, but it does say in parentheses, the word Hebron, conjunction or joining. And then it says of an ancient town in the tribe of Judah, formerly called, and then it's in the Hebrew word, so I don't know what that was. But then it also says it was the royal city of David for some time until after the taking of Jerusalem, which comes out of 2 Samuel 2:1. Then it tells you it is now called. It tells you in the Chaldee, the city of a friend of the merciful Elohim or God, i.e. of Abraham. And it was just interesting, I guess, just when I looked at that, and then I compared it to Genesis 13, which they reference. Genesis 13, verse 18 says, then Abraham removed his tent and came and dwelt in the plain of Mamre, which is in Hebron, and built there an altar unto Yahuah. So in that same place, he had already previously built an altar unto Yahuah. And then we, of course, 10 chapters later, is the same place where he buries his wife and he buys that land. So I don't know, I was just finding interest in that. And then also the fact that it was an ancient town of the tribe of Judah, Judah being it's a specific tribe that has a lot of importance we see, and then, just, I don't know, I just threw that out there because I thought that was very interesting, the way that they were breaking it down, I thought that was interesting, brothers.
Tribe of Yehuda is where the Yahusha came from. So you'll definitely tie back to Mashiach again. Never.
Kirjath Arba was what Hebron used to be called, as we saw in the beginning of the chapter. But very important, to see those things too that we're pulling out, whether it's cross-referencing, looking back to when these cities and these towns and these people were first mentioned, to see into prophecy how they relate specifically to Yahusha. So very important here. But very good study. And this concludes our Genesis 23 study. Shabbat Shalom.